A New York notary public is asked to take the acknowledgement of a deed affecting real property located in the state. After completing the acknowledgement, the notary realizes the signer is known to be fraudulent and that the deed is likely forged. However, the notary chooses to proceed, falsely certifying the acknowledgement as valid. Under Real Property Law 330, which of the following would be the most likely consequence of the notary's actions? Well, let's have a look at that section 330 entitled Officers Guilty of Malfeasance Liable for Damages, and it states that an officer authorized to take the acknowledgement or proof of a conveyance or other instrument, or to certify such proof or acknowledgement, or to record the same, who is guilty of malfeasance or fraudulent practice in the execution of any duty prescribed by law in relation thereto, is liable in damages to the person injured. In other words, civil liability. As well, there is also criminal liability. If you look to section 170.10 of the Notary Public License Law booklet entitled Forgery in the Second Degree, and we're dealing with forgery here, it states, if we go down to the bottom, forgery in the second degree is a Class D felony. In other words, there's criminal liability as well. So with this in mind, let's have a look at our four choices to determine our solution. Choice A states, the notary will face both criminal and civil liability for fraudulent acknowledgement. Indeed, as we read from before, the notary would be subject to both criminal liability, as we read from section 170.10, Class D felony, as well as civil liability, as we read from section 330, and therefore choice A seems to be our solution. But before we mark it as such, let's have a look at the other three choices just to be certain. Choice B states, the acknowledgement will be upheld in court if the notary claims ignorance of the fraud. Well, that is incorrect. The acknowledgement cannot be upheld when it's involving a forgery, and therefore choice B is not the correct solution. Choice C states, the acknowledgement will be valid if the parties continue to use the document in transactions. Again, similarly, when dealing with a transaction in which we know now is involving a forgery and fraud, etc., the acknowledgement cannot be valid, and therefore choice C is not the correct solution. Choice D states, the notary can avoid liability if the fraud is discovered more than 1 year after the act. Well, in fact, no such statute of limitations of a year or otherwise is stated in the laws we read from, and therefore choice D is not the correct solution, which indeed leaves choice A. The notary will face both criminal and civil liability for fraudulent acknowledgement as the correct solution.